A bit of an unusual comparison, the camera flagship, the Oppo Find X8 Ultra versus the Huawei Pura X. Why the heck am I comparing the camera king with a mediocre camera setup? Just simply because they feature a color sensor, both of them. And different technology a little bit there. The Oppo has a spectrum color sensor that is like dividing the image into various different parts to give us better white balance and accurate colors, where the Huawei also does this in a way, has a red maple sensor here, which is doing more. It is like gaining more different colors together that should increase accuracy, but also a little bit of detail. So we will have to see which one has the most accurate color and which one has more details. Can the red maple with a smaller sensor gain the same kind of details as the way larger 1-inch type sensor? Let's find out and let's get started. And of course we also want to check out how they are performing with video and color. Is the spectrum sensor that the Oppo has here used on the video format, or isn't it used? So what do you think about this? First of all, HDR, then a bit of greenery. How well does it compete with the Pura X that we will check out right now? And I'm recording with the Huawei Pura X. Look at the colors, look at the greenery behind me, look at my face and overexposure eventually. HDR should be a bit worse. We have worse lens coating as well. So what do you think about this one here? How well is the Pura X with its red maple sensor comparing or competing with the Oppo Find X8 Ultra? So what do you think about this one here? Comparing the photos with the main camera sensor, we see wider field of view on the Oppo. The Pura X is a bit narrower, 24 versus 23mm, but both performing basically the same with HDR, but you can see directly we have much more contrasty look on the Find X8 Ultra, where the Pura X is less contrasty, has a bit of raised shadows for sure. Just look here under the bridge, for example, way darker on the X8 Ultra. And when we take a look at the rest of the picture, you can see that the Huawei is tending towards more warmer color tones, where it's a bit cooler on the Oppo. And I think this is a generalization that we can tell, or I can tell you already. One thing that you will notice in every shot, we have warmer shots on the Huawei, we have a bit of colder shots on the Oppo, and here you can also clearly see it. Interestingly enough, in terms of sharpness and detail level, not much of a difference between those two. It is just that the Huawei is like sharpening things up a little bit more with its smaller sensor, but the main camera sensor is a bit better for sure. This shot here, a clear difference between those two, much more bokeh on the Find X8 Ultra, with the Pura X that's just with its 8 megapixel upscaling to 12, struggling a bit there also in terms of detail levels. And you can see also the more warmer tone there, in this case on the Oppo a little bit, with the green grass, where it's a little bit cooler here on the Huawei. When we go on this shot, quite an interesting shot because it's an HDR shot and also tells a lot about how they work. And here I think the Pura X is doing a much better job than the Find X Ultra, where the Find X Ultra has everything overexposed here. And especially here, everything is like, you see, overexposed, the colors washed out, and even the sky a bit overexposed. The Pura handles that a lot better, so it's darker in here, even though there's a lot of fringing going on here as well a bit, but the Huawei suffers a little bit more from this. It's much nicer exposed here, and the color is more accurate than, of course, the X8 Ultra, so something that Oppo has, I think, still to work with. Also here, it is a little bit bluer, not so sharp there. This is a bit warmer here for some reason. It is actually a bit bluer there. And this here is a quite interesting shot because we have like this grass here has a different color than the far away grass. The far away grass being in the sun most of the time, being a little bit less green than the one here. It's a bit too much punched up on the X8 Ultra. I think it has something to do with the added contrast, just too much contrast. The Pura X, however, is like a little bit lackluster there. We can see a little bit of difference in terms of sharpening. Again, the Huawei is sharpening a lot here. It is, yeah, almost unpleasant to look at, sharpening level there. And here as well, this is the ultra wide angle on both, as you can see. So the Huawei is overdoing it a little bit with the sharpness there and sharpening. The other colors there in the background, almost the same, almost identical. There's not much of a difference. The greenery, however, It looks again a little bit punchier here on the Oppo, which is not so true. I think the Huawei is doing a better job there on the ultra wide angle when it comes to color accuracy. Then we have a 2x shot, actually not 2x 35mm, so 1.5x on both, and very identical. You can see almost no difference between them besides like maybe the shadowy area here in the front. Yeah, some people were like dirtbags and throwing around their treasures around. Yeah, and a bit more punchy green here in comparison to the Huawei. When we take a look at the background here, however, very identical. You really have to pixel peep to see the difference between those two here. And when you go in here, you can see the ever so slightly more warmer color tone on the Huawei, where the Oppo is a bit cooler here. And the same goes when you go in here and look at the trees. You can see like the sparkle of more yellow in the trees there of the Huawei in comparison to the Oppo, which is a little bit colder there in this regard. Otherwise, very, very identical. The stairs here as well, you can see a little bit more yellow on the Huawei, a bit colder on the Oppo. Selfies, however, are another twist, basically, taken with the main camera sensor here, also 35mm on both. Both handling it very nice, and I'm surprised to how good the Pura X is competing against the Find X Ultra. But you can clearly see the Find X Ultra is the warmer now. So when faces come into play, the Find X Ultra and X8 Ultra is warming up everything, where the Pura keeps it a little bit more real. But yeah, you can see that my face is a bit more reddish there. This is like an issue that Huawei had in the past, but I don't think it is like too reddish like it was still on the Pura 70 Ultra or the predecessor Mate 6 Pro and so on, and the P60 Pro. We see also that the Huawei is sharpening things up a little bit more. The eyebrows are a bit fake, a bit too dark here. I like the Oppo shot there a bit better, but yeah, from the detail level and the sharpness, like the Huawei is doing, I think it's not too over sharpened. It is very sharp for sure, but not over sharpened there too much that it like looks too artificial. Maybe this eye looks a bit more artificial there, but that is like very, very close. Bokeh, of course, bokeh is a bit smoother here on the Oppo. A bit less smooth here on the Huawei. We can see also, I think in terms of dynamic range, maybe there's a slight difference between those two as well, where the Huawei is a little bit brighter there. But both have like this overblown highlight there in the background, just like it is a tad warmer there on the Oppo in comparison to the Huawei. And yeah, the shirt here or my jacket, same color almost. There's not much of a difference between those two. And let's check out the next shot. Quite interesting, 3.5 versus 3x zoom here. Even though the Huawei has like the weaker sensor here, I was surprised how good it is in this comparison. Yes, it is a bit more punchy, a bit more contrasty still on the Oppo for sure. This is why this red here is way too punchy, I would say. And this one here is much more realistic. The same goes for those here. It's way too punchy, this orange, because the sign is like up for years already, so it doesn't have this punchy colors anymore. And yeah, the rest here as well, you can see like the more contrasty and sharper look here on the Oppo. And when we take a look at the colors here, we can see that the Oppo, I think, is with its contrasty look and a little bit of this color punch, a bit too punchy. So the red was more what the Huawei is showing up here. But the Huawei has some weird issue. You can see here the 3 and 2 are yellow for some reason, and here they are white. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I think it might be the background there. That is, yeah, I think it's a background here that is like yellow, and this is why it's yellowing up those two numbers. Otherwise, the green is where you can see the biggest difference there. The Huawei, again, a bit yellow. It is a bit too punchy. It's not as cold as green in reality as the Oppo is making it out, but it's a bit too yellow on the Huawei nevertheless. And this yellow here is too punchy on the Oppo, and here has the more accurate color on the Huawei. When you go to the blue, the same happens here. Yes, because of the more added contrast there, this blue is also a little bit too punchy, and it's more what we saw here on the Huawei, what we see on the Huawei. However, then when it comes to the background here, for example, this sun shielding, it's way too yellow on the Huawei. It is much more like this greenish kind of, almost like it was yellow once, and then the color is like worn off. that we see here on the Oppo. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Both have like some tendencies, like the Huawei is going more yellow, the Oppo more cool. The Oppo is, I'm leaning towards the Oppo being a bit more neutral with the color, but the Huawei has a bit of like this, yeah, let's make it a bit more yellowish look, a bit warmer, everything there. Same goes with the pavement, as you can see here, way warmer there. And this one, here's a little trick that I'm doing, like on the Huawei, I'm checking out the vivid mode, because yeah, I noticed a huge difference in terms of contrast level. The Oppo is doing lots of more contrast. The Huawei is adding also lots of more contrast if you choose the vivid mode. The vivid mode, however, is not only pushing the contrast, but it's also making colors a bit more vivid. But here they're very, very comparable, and you can see like the difference. I'm surprised how good the main camera sensor of the Huawei is keeping up here with the 1-inch type sensor of the Oppo, for sure. Yeah, there's a sharpening definitely applied there, but it's not looking too artificial, like there's a white outline or something like this, or it's like completely sharpness level boosted to 100 or something like this. And the contrast is even a bit higher on the Huawei now than on the Oppo. And this is like an example shot, the normal shot with the Oppo here, the normal shot with the Pura X, and then I switch to the vivid mode. And you can see how much closer it is in terms of like the shadow details there and the contrast levels there. But when we go in and take a look at this vivid mode, it is a little bit more vivid for sure, but it's still a little bit warmer than the Oppo is doing. Like this roof here is a bit more towards what the Oppo is showing than what the Huawei is showing. Huawei is a tad warmer here as well. The same goes for the tree, for the trees here. You can see it's a bit colder here. This is a little bit more contrasty still, a little bit more sharper, sharpened up again. Huawei is sharpening everything up. It is not like I said, over sharpened, but it's like a look that some people probably don't like. It's too digital. And this look here was more flat and definitely more yellow here, as you can see there. And here the roof is like more closer towards what the Oppo is doing, but still a bit warmer still in the end. And the same goes for here. Shadow details and so on. Tad warmer there still. This shot quite interesting because flowers are always hard to shoot, especially with this color here. And here on the display I directly saw, okay, the Huawei colors are off and the Find X8 Ultra matched what I saw with my own eyes. And the Huawei is not as much off as the display made it out to be. Also focusing, yeah, shallow focusing on the 1-inch type sensor of the Oppo has some difficulties. I took like 3 shots of this, but could never get this middle part sharp here with the autofocus in the auto mode. Of course, I could go in the master mode and manual focus, but the Huawei directly nailed it here. Probably easier with this tinier sensor. And yeah, what we can see here is very, very close, but it's a tad warmer still on the Huawei. And I can fix it in the Huawei. Just another flower, but I could fix it and make it way cooler. Now it's also a little bit off because it is a warm day, but this is another flower more in the shadow, so maybe it is more accurate there. By just going to Pro mode and choose the white balance manually, or in this case I didn't even manually turned around or twisted the Kelvin numbers there. Well, the only thing, or adjusted the Kelvin numbers, the only thing I did is like set it to daylight, and then I have this shot which has the more correct colors what I saw with my own eyes there for sure on the Huawei. And this shot here, dandelion usually is yellow, but the Huawei for some reason makes it more orangey than it actually was. Maybe it is a contrast that it added a little bit, but the Oppo is more accurate in this color. So yeah, in general, in these modes, I think the Oppo is more accurate with the color. Also here, Selfie, another one with the sun now illuminating my face from one side there. And I think here the Huawei still is doing, I think, a little bit of a better job there with handling the highlights here. Because it's a little bit too yellow, too warm, and it has this like feeling of being a bit overexposed, where the Huawei is like a bit colder there and yeah, a bit over sharpened for sure as well in terms of detail levels there. But especially in the hair, you can see like it's like definitely over sharpened there. And too punchy with the greens, as you can see here, the Huawei is adding a little bit too much punch there. But which one you like, which one you prefer of those two here? And then another shot with the Huawei going from this, which is the original mode, like this red here, which the Huawei is more accurate on this red here. Actually, red maple sensor may be helping with this one. It's like more accurate red because it's like a little bit more of like a blooming red that we have here. And this one here is a bit of a more darkish red, a little bit not so signal red, where actually this is a little bit more signal red. And when I go to the vivid mode on the Huawei, you can see that it is leaning more towards a tiny bit more towards what the Oppo is doing there. So it might be also the contrast level, but still more signally red there. And then another shot also now again with the vivid mode or X-Image vivid mode on the Pura X. Very comparable to the Find X8 Ultra in terms of the levels, but you can see again warming up everything a little bit more on the Huawei. Contrast level maybe a bit deeper even than on the Oppo. Again, sharper here because it is sharpening things up a little bit more, and we have the smaller sensor there. Here, very, very comparable. Not much of a difference between those two in those levels here. Just like the stones, when you look at this, a bit warmer again on the Huawei, where it's more accurate on the Oppo. So the Oppo is more for accurate colors. Yes, of course, the Huawei with the vivid mode is punching things up a little bit more. This is why, it is appearing a little bit punchier there for sure. And it's appearing sharper, which is like surprising, but it's like, the sharpening of Huawei that they're doing there. This one is interesting because here I think that the Oppo is doing a nice job with the outer color being more accurate, where the Huawei is a bit more colder. This is actually because it was in the sun a bit warmer there. But this blue is wrong on the Oppo. What I saw with my own eyes is more leaning towards what the Huawei is doing. It's maybe a tiny bit brighter, but it is also the yellow is much more realistic on the Huawei. It's a bit too orangey here on the Oppo for that matter. So quite interesting. You can see that sometimes the Huawei can perform a little bit better with the colors, not all colors, but sometimes some colors, and sometimes the Oppo is doing better. But in general, when you generalize everything, the Oppo has more accurate colors than the Huawei. The Huawei has a bit of more stylish kind of look, and it's leaning towards a bit more yellow. And this now with the vivid mode, of course, it is vividing up this Santa Claus that was like there. Same goes for the shirt of my daughter here. This is the original color, what the Oppo is showing, and this is the punched up color because we are in vivid mode. So it's like doing it a bit more vivid. And you can clearly see it here, not so much, because here I think this is a bit too red, and this is a little bit more what I saw with my eyes on the Huawei again. So yeah, there are some situations where the Huawei is doing a bit better there. This is now an original mode again, with its original mode, however. When you want like the almost same but a little bit warmer and a little bit more punchy look on the Pura X as the Oppo Find X8 Ultra, at least in daylight, then you go to the vivid mode. Then you have something very, very comparable to the Find X8 Ultra. Otherwise you get a bit of more flatter look, maybe a bit more leaning towards like a natural look, let's say it like this, on the Pura. At least it tries to be more natural with a tiny hint of more warmth. And here you can see when I'm in the original mode, the yellow shirt of my daughter is like more what it actually was. Maybe it's slightly bit punched up, but it's like still more accurate in this regard. So that's everything for those photos here and everything for this comparison. So in general, I can say the Oppo Find X8 Ultra has the more accurate colors, not in all situations. And it's like sometimes a bit too contrasty, like in this situation here. The Pura X is very close to the Oppo Find X8 Ultra, just with a tiny tint or hint of more warmth. And otherwise the Pura X is, with its main sensor, sharpening things up a little bit more than the Oppo is doing. Both are doing fantastic jobs here, I think, with the color accuracy, and I can accept the Huawei with the slight nuances and differences in terms of like making it a bit warmer, because it's like very accurate, but adding like its own kind of styling to it, which is like a bit of a warmer look. Where the Oppo is leaning towards more of really showing what is really there. So the real color as accurate as possible. It doesn't always do it, but most of the times it nails the colors, especially with flowers and this punchy kind of colors. It is like most of the time more accurate. than the Huawei is. So this is everything for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Until the next time. Bye.